One day in 8th grade at college, there was a kid who was a real handful. I don't know what he had, but he was mean to everyone all the time and didn't have any friends. One day in PE class, he started insulting me behind my back. It happens from time to time, and it doesn't bother me anymore, but then he did it 4 or 5 times in 2 hours. My friend asked me to let her through to the next exercise. I said yes, and let her through. At the same time, this guy also asked me to let him through on his usual contemptuous tone. I said no and told him to queue like everyone else. He started telling me that if he wants to pass, he will pass. I put my hand on his chest to push him away while raising my voice. He yelled at me to stop, pushing my hand away as if I was inferior. I really hurt him that day. I don't remember much, but I remember that I kicked him in the stomach while he was on the ground. He didn't even try to defend himself. I'm not the violent or quarrelsome type. It's rather the opposite. I was harassed a lot. The teacher had to step in and separate us. I remember the troublemakers in the class came to see me and told me to settle it after class and not in class to avoid punishment. I earned their respect, and they never bothered me again. I was never punished for this. When I told the principal what happened, he said I was being harassed and that he was letting it go. This wasn't the first time I'd been harassed, and I often fought back against those who attacked me. But I never got punished for it. I actually have a story of my own. There was this kid on my bus that would all make fun of me for the way I looked, the way I dressed. Sometimes he made fun of me just because I bought lunch from school one day. On the bus he asked me, "What did you eat for lunch? That dog shit you always eat." I responded with, "No, I actually had the milk your dad never came back with." I got my start on a farm in Europe. I studied languages in college, and we were required to spend a year abroad immersing ourselves in the language. So I ended up in the middle of nowhere with no friends and a pretty average grasp of the language. All I had was my host family who provided room and board, food, and, to be honest, a pretty meager salary. It was the perfect setup for an abuser, which my boss's wife turned out to be. She bullied and belittled me in every way she could, making it hard for me to connect with the other employees, setting impossible tasks, and even withholding my food. She threatened to give my university a bad transcript and make it difficult for me to continue my degree if I told. It was like Cinderella, down to doing all of her chores around the house and farm and taking care of her children. I couldn't leave because there was only one bus a week, and she withheld my money. There was no internet to get help, and I seriously considered ending my own life. When I got food poisoning and she ignored me for a week, leaving me with no food, I promised myself I'd make her pay. At the end of my year there, I finally got my chance. By the time the final day came around, my transcript had been signed, my flights were booked, and everything was squared away. She had nothing left to hold over me, but I had plenty I could use against her. I was packing up when she asked me to go help a goat give birth. This was important because we'd already lost 2 goats that year due to the harsh winter. She was the type who wore designer clothes on a farm and refused to get dirty. Her husband was out of the loop since he had a second job and was often away, so he had no idea about any of this. She was the ideal farm wife with him around. I told her straight up that she didn't have any control over me anymore. If she didn't go over to the goat pen and do it herself, I'd tell her husband everything. She tried to think of a way to get me to do it, even suggesting her elderly father or neighbor do it instead. That's how much she disliked farm work. No, it had to be her, or her perfect reputation would be in jeopardy. Before I left, I saw her standing in the goat pen with a bloody, squirming kid. She was surrounded by local kids who had come to watch. Her nice clothes and heels were covered in mud, blood, placental fluid, and some thick yellow goo I couldn't identify. It was twins, and it was beautiful. I once worked on a group project about the American Revolution, focusing on key battles like Concord, Lexington, Yorktown, Bunker Hill, and the Saratogas. There were 3 of us in this group. I was the know-it-all who never gave a shit unless I had to. Lacey Zimmerman was basically the same, but she did care. Then there was Aiden Brown, who didn't contribute much to the slideshow. Since Aiden did poorly while we did well, the teacher assumed we didn't help him, even though he was clearly capable of doing the work on his own. Lacey and I got a D-, while Aiden got a C+. Here's how we got our revenge. For 4 months, I gave him the wrong information when he asked for help, and he always did. Lacey thought I was crazy, but she hated Aiden too. It wasn't a major issue, but it's satisfying to see him reading from note cards with handwriting he can't read. My friend showed the art teacher a school drawing she did because she was looking for ideas for class. It was so good that the teacher put it on display in a silver frame. She and I have one mini art contest together, and while we were drawing, the bully came over and spilled black paint on our work. We had spent 14 hours drawing realistic portraits of each other. She started to cry because it had taken up our entire weekend, so I decided to make a plan. I knew the bully, who we'll call Emma, had been working on a model for science. When I was in the science lab alone doing mine, I got black paint and a Sharpie and covered hers in it with insults about the teachers. I even learned how to draw in her handwriting. She got suspended for a month, but I managed to avoid any consequences. She never bothered us again. In 8th grade, a guy from my school who was a year or two older than me decided to mess with me on the way to school. He was walking behind me, throwing chestnuts at me. I just kept on walking, trying to ignore him as best I could. He probably thought that I wouldn't do anything to him, given my gender. As it turned out, he was mistaken. When it was time for the break, I decided to get my revenge. I strolled over to him. He was standing there with his friends, I'd say 7 to 9 people, and tilted my head to the side so he'd turn around. As soon as he turned around, I punched him in the face and walked away. As I did so, I could hear all his friends saying, "Oh my," and the guy stopped bothering me after that. I still feel good about it, even now. My sweetest revenge was the day when the bully who'd been messing with me for over a year was alone. His friends were sick, and he had to fight me one-on-one. He had no fighting ability. I could see he was trying to wind up that punch, but I was ready for it. I dodged it and started beating the shit out of him while he was off balance. I had him pinned on the ground, head under my foot, but I took it off just so I could replace it with my hand and tell him everything I wanted to say for a year. The next day his friends came back, and while they were ready to beat me up, the main bully wasn't. He was terrified because he knew that if I could somehow get past his guard dogs, there'd be no way he could win that fight. I was hanging out with my gay BFF, Roman, not Roman from the series Sanders Sides, and my older sister's friend, Spee, had the audacity to start bullying Roman, which led to tears because he's quite sensitive. Just to give you a bit of background, I was dressed in a princess outfit, including the tiara. Anyway, I got up and did a polite curtsy before running at SB and pointing a frying pan at her and scolding her in Spanish. SB was fluent in the language, so she knew exactly what I was saying and begged me not to hurt her. I ignored her pleas and threw the frying pan at her nose, breaking it and knocking her to the ground. I told her, "That'll teach you not to mess with me or my friends." Then I gave her a little smile and curtsied again. I turned to Roman and said, "If she ever says anything mean to you again, I'll do everything I can to make her life miserable." I wasn't actually going to do that, but it was the first thing that came to mind when SB started saying that to Roman. I was bullied quite a bit in elementary and middle school, so by the time I got to high school, I had a lot of patience. It's my junior year, and this kid has been a real handful. Teachers of all types and other students who won't join in his antics have all had to put up with him. I really cannot emphasize enough how much I did not say any of this here. You didn't take any of this in. One day, he flipped me off from across the hall, and I gave him the finger back. He got upset and hit me. I'm about twice his size now, and have been putting up with his antics for months. I grabbed him by the neck, put him in a chokehold, and said, "Don't ever touch me again." I released him, but he punched me again, so I started circling, daring him with my eyes to actually start something. As luck would have it, a teacher happened to come by that day and broke us up. Once more, I want to clarify that I did not write any of this. A month or so later, the brat still hadn't learned his lesson. He's just as much of a jerk to everyone but his enablers. On the bus ride from one building to another, he sat behind me and hit me repeatedly with the seatbelt buckle. I've had enough, so I wait in the lobby for class to start and confront him. I tell him, "You have to stop this, or I'll have to make you." I give him one last chance for peace. He shoves me, so I shove him back. He shoves me again, so I shove him against the bench. I laugh and say, "I'll give you a hard start," and pet him. He gets behind me, climbs on my back, and pulls my hair. I start to stand, and he kicks my knees from behind. I do it again, and he does it again with more trouble. I stand my ground despite his kicks and slam my body backwards against the concrete floor, throwing him off balance. I swing my backpack around in a circle narrowly avoiding him, and let out a deep, angry roar. After months of torment, he's finally going to get what he deserves at my hands. I charge, and his blows don't faze me. I tackle him to the floor and start unleashing a flurry of blows on this brat, my arms moving rapidly up and down. I don't bash his head into the concrete on purpose. He needs to live to know what he did wrong. My friends separate us because they're good people. He lunges against their arms, and I laugh in his face. The situation calms down a bit, and this brat goes to someone and shows them where I bit him while he was grabbing my face. I walk by and hit him in the eye right as the vice principal comes out. After that, he left me alone. In my freshman year of high school, there was this kid who was always picking on me. He tried to trip me on the stairs, stole my binder, and teased me daily. I put up with it until one day in Spanish class, his friend stepped in and got him to stop. I've been looking for a chance to get revenge for a long time. I think it was because I was a 4 feet 8 inches girl and he was a 6 feet 0 inches boy. Fast forward to senior year. He's still a jerk to everyone, and I've gotten a bit more confident. We had the same teacher for social studies, but he had the class right before mine. I knew this because we had the same computer number. The way our school handled computers was that you were assigned one from a cart and used it for the rest of the year. One of the first things we were taught about using the computers was to always log out of your account after you finished using it. This kid never did that. I had to log him out every day. One day, near the end of the year, I finally reached my limit. I think it was a combination of the freshman bullying and the computer issue that was the final straw. When I opened the computer, I noticed that he hadn't logged out. I go into his Google Drive and delete the final social studies project. It was a presentation we had to do on a part of American history that we had to do ourselves, so there was no one else who had a shared copy. I also know that he never used flash drives or save his work on anything other than Google Drive. That was the only place he saved his work. The next week, I open my laptop in social studies and see that the background is a white screen with a message that says, "Whoever deleted my project is going to get found and punched in the face." I'm now in college, and he has never found out. I was in the 8th grade and had recently gotten into fitness. I took a huge interest in boxing, especially since I was friends with some boxers at my school. My mom bought a bag and gloves, and I would practice every day after school. At the time, I was bullied by my older cousins. I was the fat kid in the family that cried to my parents every time they would mess with me. One of my cousins saw me practicing and wanted to give it a try. I was excited because I thought they took interest in my activities. I was wrong. Instead, he proceeded to beat me up with my gloves and then told me to get my other, less effective gloves and said, "Let's fight." I'm naturally shy, so I was really reluctant to do it. But he got my other cousins to egg us on, so I got my gloves and we started sparring. I told him to take it easy, but he kept hitting me, and I just snapped and hit him as hard as I could to his solar plexus, center chest, and knocked the wind out of him. He never bothered me again. I was bullied a lot in school. It wasn't just one person. It was always a group of them holding me still. When we started rugby and PE, they didn't want me on their team, as usual, so I let them all have it. They all thought I was a wimp and bad at sports because I was top of the class. I was a bit of a geek, polite, didn't swear, name call, and didn't like conflict. I got the ball and made my way through the entire group with ease. I calculated their center of gravity and knew exactly how to floor them. In the end, they just moved out of my way, and I kept scoring tries without any pressure. They also didn't choose me for basketball, and none of my classmates liked me, so they wouldn't train with me. That left me with only one option: shooting. I got so good at it that I could shoot from anywhere on the court, even from under my team's basket, and still score. Nobody ever passed to me because they assumed I was bad because I'm a geek. So the game was a tie. My team basically blamed it on the fact they had me on the team, which was like having one less team member in their eyes. Anyway, the teacher had us all take shots at the basket to break the tie. We tied again, but it was my turn last. Nobody expected me to make a shot. The look on their faces as I just kept on making baskets was priceless. After I got up to 10 in a row, the teacher decided to stop me. However, my team was shocked, but didn't give me any credit. They just slinked off to the changing rooms. I will never understand why they still refuse to pick me or pass to me when I end up on their team, even though I am actually good. I was on the swim team, and I was one of the fastest, so I got to lead the lane. This new kid joins, and he's placed in the back because he's not the fastest. Instead of trying to get faster or just accepting the spot, he decides to try to bully his way to the top. I'm not a masochist, but I can handle a fair amount of pain. I'm a little unstable physically and emotionally, which means I just don't care. After he figured all this out, he started picking on my little sister. Any guy who has one knows that he just signed his death warrant. My little sister came to me in tears because he tried to tear her pigtails out. Thankfully, he wasn't that strong. I went to him to ask him to stop, but he decided to sucker punch me in the gut instead. As I said, I can handle pain really well, so I decided to feign injury and make him come closer to gloat. Once he got within range, I grabbed him and kneed him in the groin. The incident resulted in a broken pelvis, damage to one of my testicles, bleeding for weeks, the loss of my girlfriend, and a total loss of self-esteem and respect from everyone. He still fears me to this day because I'm now much bigger than him. I broke him in every way possible, and I think it's probably because I'm 6 feet 7 inches and 250 pounds of muscle. I think I have Jacob's syndrome. There was this guy in my 3rd grade class who thought it was funny to push my buttons until I couldn't control my temper. One day, he decided to try this, but I was feeling a bit hyper that day, so I pulled out a mechanical pencil and held it like I was about to stab him at recess. I kept chasing him with it that day, and even got 2 of my friends to join in. This made him confused enough to stop and ask them why, which gave me the chance to sneak up on him. I never actually stabbed him, but I came close to doing so. Later, I got my scissors and held them in the same way in front of him until he noticed while I was writing a story. He was already scared enough that no matter what or how I was holding something, he would run away from me. I decided to go even farther and tell him I had a sickness, and he probably already got it. I was actually sick, so I ended up staying home for the rest of the week. It wasn't anything horrible or contagious, just a cold. As you might imagine, after I returned, he ceased his arguments with me. I'll tell you one about my mom and one about me. When my mom was a kid, she was bullied by someone we'll call Carl. She got tired of it and decided to take a cup and tell everyone to spit in it. This went on for hours until the cup was full of spit. Then she went up to Carl and said she was sorry and that she forgave him. Carl was surprised and tried to kiss her, but she tossed the cup full of spit at his face. Everyone was shocked. It was my turn. For years ago, I had a colleague who was obsessed with me and would try to hurt me for no reason. She even choked me. That's when I got really angry. When she touched me with malicious intent, I punched her in the stomach and then kicked her in a sensitive spot. She never bothered me again. Haha.